Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our Youth Creating Change Opportunity Gap Panel. We're incredibly excited to have you here today. My name is Meraki Solomon. I'm a leader in the YCC Grassroots Organizing Committee, and I'll be moderating today's panel. For those of you who don't know, Youth Creating Change is a social justice incubator that provides student activists with grant funding, grassroots organizer training, and mentorship. Over the past 2 years, we've supported over 45 unique social justice initiatives, held over a dozen organizer trainings, and have administered $8,000 in grant funding. This is our final panel of a 3-part series focused on prevalent social justice issue areas. Thank you for joining us. Today's panel is focused on organizations that are combating the opportunity gap within our county through educational support, teaching, and advocacy. We will be featuring MoCo students towards equitable public schools, Brooke Codes, Valentia, and Minority Scholars Programs. But before we allow our panelists to give their initial presentations, I'd like to introduce our facilitator, Ms. Brenda Wolffe, the Vice President of the Board of Education. We're honored to have Ms. Wolffe, an influential leader and decision maker, here with us today. Ms. Wolffe has served on various MCPS committees, one of which being the African American Student Achievement Group, and she's worked for 27 years at the United States Department of Education prior to her board election in 2018. She's an avid education activist and has dedicated many years towards combating the opportunity gap. Thank you so much for joining us today, Ms. Wolffe.
Thank you, Meraki. And I want to thank you all for having me today. I'm very excited to hear the presentations because anything to do with the opportunity gap, I'm all in because I consider myself an equity warrior. But before we begin, I'd like to highlight just a few things that MCPS has been doing to close the opportunity gap. We commissioned what we like to call the ERS, the Equity Resource Study, to look at how well we're using our resources within the system at the classroom level and to improve the equity outcomes. The study focused on groups of students who have historically not been able to achieve opportunity, access, and success at the same rate as other students. And we're doing a lot of other things. I'll mention a few of them. They could all be a conversation in and of themselves, so I'm not going to linger. I'm just going to give them to you. We've expanded the number of full-day pre-K seats. We instituted universal screening for middle school students at magnet programs. We launched an innovative school calendar model. We increased investment in the physical, social, and psychological well-being of students. We expanded college and career readiness opportunities, and we targeted funding for community engagement. That's just a few of the things. There are many more, and I'm really excited to share them with you after I hear what you all have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. So our first panelist is going to be Avery from MoCo Steps. And if you guys can see on the bar below, there's a Q&A tab. You guys feel free to submit questions during any point, and it can be for Ms. Wolffe or for any of the panelists. So Avery, do you want to start?
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. Okay, I see it's starting. I'm Avery Smedley. I'm the lead organizer for Students Toward Equitable Public Schools, and today I'm just going to be talking a little bit about how we are doing our part to close the opportunity gap. Next slide, please. So our mission is to promote a culture of diverse and equitable learning in MCPS, and I should preface that by saying they've already taken great strides. And the things that we're doing to do this, we're combating de facto segregation and working on any issues that fall under the umbrella of education equity, like access to resources, the opportunity gap, and the achievement gap. Next slide. And I know not everyone is familiar with the links between de facto segregation and education outcomes, so I just wanted to show this quick graphic just to make that clear. And you can see like the almost direct correlation between socioeconomic and racial segregation and education outcomes. Next slide, please. Thanks. Next slide. So our current initiatives, in order to and de facto segregation, we're doing our part to promote the boundary analysis and see to it that there are actual tangible changes made to this. And at the same time, we are also looking at the COVID-19 response, which I want to applaud MCPS for that. But we wanted to kind of play like a watchdog role in that, just to make sure that every student does have access to computers and Wi-Fi, because as we've seen with COVID-19, the issues that already existed are being exacerbated by this crisis, and we don't want any students to be left behind. Next slide. Our long-term goals, as I've said, is just to create a more equitable MCPS. We're so lucky to be in one of the best school districts in the nation, but it's such a shame that not every student has the same access and opportunity even within that district. Next slide. And if you want to contact us, learn more about what we do, join our coalition, or just see how you can support us, we've got an Instagram, a website, an email, and then these QR codes, the one on the right is for the website, and the one on the left is to sign up for our coalition. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Avery. So next we have Helena from Brook Codes.
Hey, hi everyone. Thank you all so much for coming. I wanted to share my project that I've been working on, which is called Brook Codes. And basically, Brook Codes is a computer science-led hackathon that students like you and I and many others are able to attend. Next slide. Okay, so a hackathon, for some that might not know what it is, it's like a collective group of students that are able to have like a certain amount of time to basically code. It's not necessarily hacking, which is like a legal activity, but it's like programming to solve a solution and a problem. And depending on it can be as big as solving a breach in a company to creating a video game. Next slide. So some backstory on our project. Our project is to bring communities together of students that might not necessarily have the best opportunities or resources to be involved in computer science. And being involved in computer science is a pretty big thing nowadays, since it's a growing field that many students can be into, but there can be a misconception that you have to be rich to be able to use technology and to code. But with our project, it will bend that gap students might have to achieve, and it'll just be easier for students to have a fun activity to do regardless of their level of coding or their experience, and just have the opportunity to be able to code and solve challenges. Next slide. Okay, so this is our leadership team. Majority of everyone in leadership is a woman, and that's something very unique that our project has, unlike many other computer science hackathon teams, because oftentimes it's mostly male dominated, and especially in STEM heavy fields, and it's just pretty nice that it's diverse and it's unique since it's all women, and it's pretty helpful. Next slide. Okay, so these some goals and impacts that we have that we're trying to achieve is bridging the opportunity gap, because oftentimes computer science field is dominated by not necessarily minority groups, and it can be heavily infiltrated by people in the higher percent with higher incomes and people with more resources. And with our project, we strive to allow anyone and everyone be able to have time to dedicate to computer science and learning anything IT related, since your zip code and your parents assets play a big role in how much you might know or what exactly you do. But we want to bridge that, allowing anyone and everyone the opportunity to do anything they want. Next slide. Some fun facts or interesting facts that we have is that at the California Institute of Technology, a university in California, which is STEM heavily focused, similar to MIT, only less than 1% of its undergraduate class last year was Black/African American. And then the average percentage of women working in the tech industry, so computer science, engineering, and science, is around 30%. And then something really interesting is that computer science is one of the most heavily growing careers, and it's more jobs are opening up, and it's really important nowadays to have some background in IT or computer science to have any job, because oftentimes you'll see that people will need to have use a computer eventually. And then this is the last statistic, or the last fact is from like a Google survey that was taken last year of how like people in minority groups are more likely to be able to say they saw someone do computer science, but they can't visually see themselves doing it. Next slide. So the way our project is able to aid in the opportunity gap, it's able to allow really anyone and everyone the opportunity to be able to code in Montgomery County, regardless of like their skill level and being able to like have a computer. It's like opening up a new door for people, regardless of their family's income, regardless of like what kind of piece of computer they have at their home, because there's a heavily connection between knowledge gap and students being able, like between your like instructor you have and like the ability of what you can and can't do. But our project will be able to like divide that and allow anyone and everyone the ability to participate. Next slide. So I hope you all enjoyed my short presentation. If you have any more questions, feel free to email us below, and we have a website you're able to access anytime. Thank you.
Thank you for that presentation, Helena. So next we have Luca from Valencia, and Luca actually helped coordinate this panel with me. So
thank you, Meraki. My name is Luca. I'm a co-founder of Valencia Mentorship Program. And the other co-founder, Eduardo Rosales, was on the social empowerment panel yesterday. If you could please go to the next slide. So just briefly, Valencia means courage in Spanish, and that's kind of the philosophy of our program, and I'll speak more about that later. Next slide, please. So what led us to take action? At our school, Albert Einstein High School, we observed a lack of minority students in higher level classes, particularly in the IB program. And the other co-founder, Eduardo, personally experienced what it feels like to be ashamed to be from an underdeveloped country, and he's from El Salvador. And a lack of inclusivity of recently arrived students by the general student population that we have observed at Sligo Middle School and in our own schools through our academic career. Next slide, please. So what we decided to do, we decided to work with ESOL students at Sligo Middle School, many of whom are newly arrived immigrants. And so our main focus is academic mentorship, and we help students every Tuesday and Wednesday at Sligo Middle School. And we work with the Sligo's ESOL coordinator with after-school academic tutoring. And the ESOL program is severely understaffed, and the ESOL coordinator is one of the only people who stays after school to help a great number of students. I believe there's like 30 students who stay after school for homework help. And on Thursday, we do things called Valencia activities. And so we do team building activities, sports like soccer, other games, and sometimes we eat pizza. Next slide, please. So this is just a picture of us playing soccer, kind of on a rainy day. Next slide, please. So why we do it. One of the main reasons is to support the ESOL department at Sligo. As I mentioned before, it is severely understaffed, and there's only 1 or 2 people who stay after school to help these students who are struggling in school and who have tons of homework. And oftentimes when they go home, they have to take care of family members. Family members like brothers and sisters, or they have to help their parents with work. So they often don't have time to do homework once they get home due to external factors. We also want to give students who may be struggling in school the resources and attention they need. And this often stems from, it's often difficult for these students in the classroom to really focus. And as I mentioned before, this may be due to external factors, but there's also language barriers between students and teachers. And we also really want to focus on easing the students' transition into high school. Many of the students that we've mentored this year are 8th graders, and so they're going to be going to Einstein. And so we really want to give students kind of an option to interact with high schoolers who go to that school. And so we also provide students activities to look forward to, because many of these students are probably very stressed, as I mentioned before, due to external activities or external factors at home. And one of the main reasons is combating societal ignorance and stigma around these students. And as I mentioned before, a lot of them are newly arrived immigrants, so they may experience bullying in school, outside of the school. Next slide, please. And so the issues that we're tackling, cultural incompetency, that's a huge one in our community. at Sligo Middle School and among our peers. And we feel like that's kind of like a psychological aspect and a really big factor in fueling the achievement gap and opportunity gap. And we're also working to address language barriers. We have a diverse group of mentors who speak different languages and who are from ethnically different backgrounds. And we're also addressing the opportunity gap, and all of these factors that I've mentioned kind of culminate into this one major issue. And so we also, based on the title or the name of our organization, which is Courage, we want to address the societal failure to nourish courage inherent in the students that we're working with. Next slide, please. So we are allies to these students. We are a team of passionate high schoolers, although the two photos here are just Eduardo and myself, I'm the two co-founders, and we are diverse linguistically and ethnically. Next slide, please. And you can reach us at Valentia Foundation on Instagram. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Luca. Again, I just want to remind you guys that there is a Q&A tab that we can use down below to submit questions, and you can take note of any questions you may have during any of these presentations, and we'll make sure to get to them at the end. So our last panelist is Summer from MSP.
Hi all, my name is Summer. I attend Bethesda Chevy Chase High School as a junior. So today I'll be speaking on behalf of Minority Scholars Program. Next slide, please. So what is MSB? MSB is a student-led, student-based, student-driven program, and its main focus is to ensure that students receive the same opportunities and are able to utilize them. We work towards bridging the opportunity gap and / achievement gap. Sorry, the is a typo, but we say achievement gap and opportunity gap because we personally believe that the achievement gap is a result of the achievement gap is a result of the opportunity gap, and we're hoping to kill two birds in one stone by bridging the opportunity gap, and we're hoping that that reflects on also the achievement gap. Next slide, please. So what are we known for? So MSB, we are known for spreading awareness, being change makers, advocates, and due to all of our hard work, we are actually now in all MCPS high schools and also 18 middle schools. So just to clarify, although we are a county-wide initiative, we also have clubs within schools. Next slide, please. So how are we able to achieve our goals? So we hold 2 county-wide teacher workshops every summer, which is actually often led by our internship program, which is my second point. And the workshops often center around having teachers recognize their unconscious biases. And as from personal experience, having been in the last summer's cohort, the workshops are so moving as teachers. Some teachers, from my experience, have actually teared up. Some because they recognize that some of the same issues that we are going through, that they also went through about decades ago. And some teachers also teared up, knowing that they themselves also had unconscious biases and they never recognized it, and they might have hurt a student of theirs without having any knowledge of it. So these are some of our few, this is like one of our most important initiatives that I would personally say that is very effective. And we also do a lot of community outreach. We do that through as I said before, we do have clubs within our high schools. MSP has clubs within high schools, and we all as a mass gather once a month, and just to discuss different ways we can educate everybody within our individual communities on the opportunity gap, and how we can work together to not only educate people, but bring people into our movement. And through those meetings, we also help plan our MSB retreat, which is actually a pretty known event within MCPS. Just this year, we had about, I think, 600 to 800 attendees, some being council members and board members. And in those meetings and in the MSB retreat, we discussed different aspects that we believe that contribute to the opportunity gap. The 4 main topics we focused on this year are ESOL isolation, lack of diversity in staff, lack of diversity in curriculum, and microaggressions. And on those topics, we had student leaders from our schools. We had student leaders actually lead those meetings, and it was actually student leaders that put the whole event together alongside Mr. Williams, who was one of the coordinators, and many other coordinators who really do work alongside us to ensure that we students are able to bridge the opportunity gap. Next slide, please. So as I said earlier, I also do attend BCC, and I also said that we do have clubs within schools. So what my club does is not only do we encourage having conversations with people just to ensure that we're also able, because we don't want to force it upon people for them to just drill it into their minds that the opportunity gap is a thing, but we rather want people to understand the importance of opportunity gap through hearing stories. So we do very much encourage discussions, and we have a lot of discussions. However, we love to do it also through interactive ways. So above our bi-weekly meetings, we also do a lot of field trips. We watch educational movies such as The Hate You Give. And after the movie, we actually had a discussion as the movie just talked a lot about police brutality. We spoke about that. And also the movie has a lot of hints towards the opportunity gap, as if you may have watched it, it touches upon the topic. We also talked about that. And we also we do college visits. We do 2 college visits every year. Sadly, we were unable to do any this year due to the pandemic. Our time at school got cut short, and we actually had a Georgetown University visit scheduled. However, that got canceled. But last year, we actually went to Howard and George Washington. And we also have a mentoring program. In our mentoring program, we pair an upperclassman with an underclassman, just to help they both may either have the similar schedules, or the underclassmen might just be having issues fitting into the school, as BCC is a majority affluent school, and it also has a majority white, it's also a majority white school. And so often a lot of students that don't fit that quota or don't fit that image often feel left out. And so we also use the mentoring program to help students feel more comfortable. We pair them with another student that either brings them into their friend group or just takes them to clubs and helps them explore the school a little bit more. And as I said earlier, via our bi-weekly meetings, we have discussions, and I have a poster actually put up here of Closing the Gap, which was one of our first meetings of this year, where we had we actually had a privilege walk, and it was such a huge turnout. It was a small room, and we were all stuffed, and we had to do 2 lines just to fit the amount of people we had. But it was honestly awesome. And we also do social events. And I just want to emphasize that at BCC, not just as BCC, MSP as a whole, we really do want to focus on building communities and making sure that we are creating safe spaces where students are able to come in and just speak about their experiences freely. And so through social events, we also just want to build on that community and make sure students are once again feeling very close to their peers that they're working alongside with. So we do Wednesday show days. We have so far been watching Blackish, all of us together. It's just as a community, we sit together, we watch Blackish, and we eat pizza. It's pretty fun. And of course, we have our main event of the year, which is Diversity Night, which unfortunately we were unable to have this year, as it was scheduled to be on April 24th. However, due to, once again, the pandemic, we were unable to do so. However, we are currently planning to do a virtual one, just once again to get everybody back into the flow of still being active and hoping just to give people something to do, because we have a lot of people that worked hard. And as in the Diversity Night, we have singers, dancers. We just want people to come together and be able to see each other's cultures. And once again, we also always have a big turnout, as everybody enjoys to be able to express themselves and also see their peers having fun doing it. Next slide, please. So how can you join us? As I said before, MSP is in all high schools in MCPS and 18 middle schools in MCPS. But once again, if you are in a middle school and you do want to come, and you would like an MSP at your school, please feel free to contact me. I'll get you in contact with Mr. Williams. And if you have any trouble finding your MSP, because as I said, MSP is in all high schools, but some of them have just freshly joined our family. So if you have some trouble finding it, please also feel free to contact me. I'm always open to have a conversation, bounce back, talk about some ideas you could have during this crazy pandemic time, as we as MSP at my school have been working towards different initiatives. And you could also DM me or DM my BCC MSP. We're also always open to have conversations with anybody. And also MSP as a whole, we have our own Instagram, which is Minority Scholars Program. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you, Summer, and thank you to all the panelists for preparing these presentations and for the work that you're doing to fight the opportunity gap within our community. So now we're going to move into the discussion with Ms. Wolffe. Oh, Ms. Wolffe, you're muted.
I just have to say, wow, I am so impressed, but I am always impressed when I hear from our students. You all are doing exactly the kind of work that needs to be done and exactly the kind of work that ties in to many of the initiatives that we already had. I want to just highlight a few that I heard. You'll notice that I kept taking notes because I was so impressed with what I was hearing. So I want to start with MoCo Steps. You included a slide that addressed graduation rates. The ERS study that I referred to before recognized that the opportunity gaps in student performance. So that was right on target because that directly impacts the graduation rates. With Brooks Codes, you know, we have a big divide in this country in skill level. And so any exposure we can provide to STEM opportunities, particularly because there's so many jobs available out there that we have to be able to fill those jobs. So you're right on target, getting people exposed to STEM opportunities. And you also mentioned the teacher support for computer exposure. I know that we might need to be able to do better in that area because I've heard this from other students. The Valencia project, not Valentia, pronounce that, Valentia, right?
Yeah.
Valentia project. You know, it was right on target with what we found in the ERS study too, because students of color and students of lower socioeconomic groups are less likely to be enrolled in advanced classes with a rigorous curriculum. And last but not least, minority scholars, because it's probably the one I have the most familiarity with. You know, you have been providing great mentoring and encouraging the students to challenge themselves. And I'm always impressed by that. I'm also impressed by the teacher workshops you do because that ties right into cultural competency. One of the things that we have been working on fiercely for the last 2 or 3 years. So I'm glad to hear that. And I'll move into a couple of questions that I want to raise and have you think about. I'm not going to say who should answer the question, so feel free. The first question I thought about was, how can your fellow students make a difference in diminishing the opportunity gap within our school system and community? Any takers?
I'll take it.
Go ahead, Avery.
Oh, thanks. One thing I think about when I think about the opportunity gap, I really think about like the culture of like our schools. So on an individual level, I think if students start encouraging each other to take like higher level classes. I know for minority students, especially like from my experience, I'm one of few minority students in my like higher level classes. So I think we honestly just need to change the culture on a student level and just like encourage each other to take those classes. Because I think there is a lot of like stigma and like fear behind it, but like we've got to tell each other like and support each other in order to do that.
I think also one other very important aspect is for students to actually recognize the opportunity gap, because at least from my knowledge, before I found out about the opportunity gap, when I saw the gaps in my AP classes, I was like, okay, this is normal. It was just put into to be normal for me, especially even in my honors classes. And I think it's important that we teach people, we as students right now, we all know about the opportunity gap, to also pass on that knowledge, pass on the torch to other students and continue the spread of what the opportunity gap is. Because I feel like once we all sort of have some sort of familiarity with it, we're able to sort of feel a fire within us will sort of a fire within us will spark that will sort of push us to wanting to do something about it. At least that's what happened with me and a lot of my peers at MSB.
I think you're right about that. I think that students think it's just normal. I'm not good enough to be in that class and I'll just take this level. But we've got to push the students to achieve to their highest level, their highest ability, because they can do it. And a lot of times they have the exact same profile as some of the students who are entering those classes. And that's what they don't seem to realize. And that's one of the things I think that we noticed in the ERS study. So you're right on target. Okay, ready for the next question. Anybody else have any thoughts on that one?
I would like to add on to something. I think it's really important to start like discussions and talk about like problems within like the opportunity gap, because it's really important to talk about like these issues, because oftentimes some of like our classmates might not even know that like certain students might feel disadvantaged or like feel like they're not as equal to others, and it's really important that we bridge this gap so that everyone is equal.
Absolutely. I think that that is a problem, you know, self-identification and the way people feel about themselves, particularly if they don't see people that look like them in the classes and they don't see teachers that look like them teaching some of the classes. So again, I think that that's a really good thought that you've raised. Okay, hold on 1 second. Let me see what I thought. Yeah, okay. I want to get back to the point that was that, and I don't see her picture up there that she made, but I think we have to create a culture of achievement. I think that's very important, and I'm not sure that that's being done in the Black and Brown community. So we have to talk about it to the other students, and we also have to get the teachers to recognize that our students can achieve. Okay, so next question. What are some misconceptions you've encountered regarding your work on educational equity in MCPS?
I have something to say. So for my work, especially with Latin American ESOL students and ESOL students from all over, in middle school, I heard a lot the phrase, "Oh, they don't try in class," and like based on the previous question, I think this misunderstanding and ignorance is really what stems a lot of the stigma and suppression of courage that really is fueling the opportunity gap. And so just this idea that kids don't try in class is just a complete falsehood. I think it's really important to understand that these kids, there are situations that they're in that are really preventing them from achieving, and just understanding that. And that also has to do with cultural competency. So you really need to understand where these kids are coming from and understand that they're like you, but they have more barriers that they need to jump over.
You know, clearly teacher expectations plays into a lot of this, what I call the opportunity gap. I think I heard the young lady from the Minority Scholars Program say it's not an achievement gap, and she's right about that. It is an opportunity gap. And oftentimes, you know, I'm very proud of a lot of our teachers, but we do recognize and we know that there are some teachers out there that just don't believe that Black and Brown children can achieve. Let's be honest about it. And if you have low expectations from teachers, that's just what you get, low achievement. Any other takers on that question?
Ms. Wolffe, if I might add to what you just said, also the issue comes from counselors who might not expect the most from Black and Brown students. I know I'm also part of MSP, and I was at the retreat, and one of the things that the workshop that I led was on like minorities in higher education, and I heard so many students over and over saying like, my counselors don't think that I can be in this class and they're not suggesting this for me, whereas it's probably not the case for other students where the counselors are expecting them to take these higher level classes.
You're absolutely on target with that also, Avery. I've heard the same thing from many of our students. And again, it's a question of expectations. You know, it really is. And we have to educate the students, because a lot of our students they're not getting the kind of support at home simply because their parents don't know. They don't know how to work the system. They haven't had the education level that allows them to participate like that. So whatever the school tells them is what they believe their child should take, instead of insisting that their child strive to do better by placing them in this class. Because again, I'm going to say, we can see the same profile on two different children, and one is placed in an academically, higher level class, and one is not. So you're absolutely right about that. Any other takers on that? Well, I'm very pleased with the answers, and I've got more questions. Don't think that I don't. Okay, so what advice would you give aspiring student advocates? Where should they begin? Now, all of you are advocates, so think about how you got started. What encouraged you? How would you encourage other people to focus on an issue and advocate for that issue?
What really started my program with my friend Eduardo was just like really feeling an issue that I connected to and that I had a personal experience with, and something that I really felt in my school, in my academic career, and also feeling that you can have a feasible impact on it. So really just find something that you're really passionate about, because if you're not passionate about it, you're not going to make change. So just make sure that you find something close to your heart that you feel that you can really address.
Absolutely. It has to be something that you feel inside of you, because that's how I got started on equity work. I don't know if many of you have ever watched some of these videos they put out from MCPS, but I talked about how, and maybe this one wasn't in, when I was a senior in high school, I wanted to go to Smith College, which is one of the Seven Sisters colleges, and academically, quite high. And I went to a Catholic school at the time, and the nuns felt that because I was a Black student, I should go to a Black college, and they would not do a recommendation, a high school recommendation to college. And right then and there, I said, this will never happen to anyone else that I know. And I became, in my mind, an equity warrior from that point on. So definitely it has to be something, to me, that you feel that you have been impacted by. Anyone else? Come on, you all are advocates, so I know you all got your start some way. Let's talk about it.
If I could just add something. So I actually started my work after moving to the US from the Middle East. I was in my old school, I was one of the only Black girls. It was me and my sisters. And then here it was the same situation with BCC and Westland. I was like one of the only Black girls in my honors classes, AP classes, because I went on that track. And for so long, I thought that was normal until I joined MSP. And I think it was MSP that made me realize, one, my feelings of, okay, this is kind of weird, was not like one that I only felt. And it also, MSP gave me this drive knowing that I can do something about it. It seems, just as Luca said earlier, knowing that I was able to do something, that blew my mind, because I never really had that opportunity. I was always just like, stick with your studies. That was always like that was my mentality. But once I had that fire, once I got the knowledge, oh, okay, so I have MSP. I started off with my school's MSP. I became a leader in my sophomore year. And then I went off to the countywide, just because I was so fascinated by how much work I was able to do for an issue that I've been facing my whole life, but never for a second thought I could do something about it. So I was just so obsessed with it. I got so into it. And then I started joining MoCo Steps, which Avery created, which is an amazing program, and just so many other different programs. It was just that drive knowing I can do something. And I think I would encourage any student, if you ever feel as if you are going through something, just know you're not alone, and somebody's probably going through it. And you should take the first step if somebody has already not taken that first step, because you don't know how many lives you're going to change. Because MSP, I can for sure say, changed my life. I was a quiet girl because I came from a different country. It was just like such a different environment, culture shock type of situation. But now I'm sitting in a panel talking about my experience. So I think it really, starting these programs, doing all these stuff, really is, I would say it's just like take the first leap, take the first step. You never know where it could take you.
Absolutely.
Oh, sorry, Miss Wolffe, but we have time for about one more question from you to the panelists if you want to. Go ahead.
Okay, absolutely. In addressing equity issues, what are some of the most prevalent obstacles you've faced?
One thing with my organization, I would say a big thing is like fear and misinformation. Going back to like the, I guess, de facto segregation and just like making classes more like integrated in general, I think that there's like a lot of like fear and misinformation around like just like having more integration with like students of color. And that's just like a big thing that people think that it's like gonna harm their own children. But the thing about like having more integrated classrooms is that it actually supports every student. Every student is going to be more likely to, I think everyone has higher earnings. It improves your cognitive skills, your creativity, and it's important because we're in an increasingly diverse world and you have to be able to have that skill set. So I think just combating fear and misinformation, that's like the biggest thing.
How did you overcome whatever obstacle you felt, and when you were advocating for the issue that you were raising in this presentation?
I guess I can add those.
Okay.
So at my school, as I said, at MSP, we do focus on bridging the opportunity gap. And a part of that is, at the end of the year, we always have teachers. At the end of the year, we have students who go around, talk about the IB and AP program. IB program and the AP program, just so students, freshmen and sophomores are able to get a perspective of both. So we had a situation where an MSP leader actually was about to go give a presentation about the IB program in an ESOL class. And a counselor who was with him whispered, "Oh, you don't need to go in there because they're not going to apply to that. They're not going to go into those classes." And I think these are just some of this is one of the many sort of situations where we have been taken aback and we're like, whoa. Because, I mean, we know these issues exist, but I think especially nobody really tries to say it in front of our faces. It's more like little subtle comments that we get, whether that be, I guess also while doing the workshops this summer, a friend of mine spoke on about her experience, about how she really appreciates having teachers that look like her. And a white teacher actually got offended. He was like, "Why wouldn't you want me as a teacher?" It's also, once again, as Avery said, just understanding, just being able to understand somebody else's feelings and as to why they feel that way rather than getting attacked. I think often a lot of people fear change. If they fear feeling as if somebody's targeting them. And that's never our mission. Our mission is to never target anybody, but rather to just create a more like a group where we're all united and just where we're just a community rather than us feeling as if we need to divide ourselves just over simple facts simple parts of our identity that none of us can really change.
I would like to add on, if we still have time, to what Summer said. I through like my project of Brook Codes, like a lot of students, they said that they wanted to like be involved and like be part of it, but for like some reason they said that they just like it didn't feel right for some reason. And I can like somewhat understand why they said that, because I've went to like a hackathon at a university at Johns Hopkins called Blue Jay Hacks, and like the environment there, it's like very different to like a normal school. It's like just completely different, and like it can see definitely be a place like if you're like not really like passionate about computer science, you can definitely see people like not being able to fit in or not feeling comfortable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, did anybody else want to contribute before I say anything? Because what I will tell you is, you know, the board does graduation every year. Somebody from the board has to be at each graduation. So I did 5 of them last year, and before each one, I went and talked to the leadership, the student leadership at the school. And without question, each school, the students said that what they liked most about MCPS was the diversity. So, you know, this is coming from the students. This is actually student-led in a lot of ways, because students recognize that diversity is our greatest asset. we just have to convince the other people that don't believe that you're talking about, that you've encountered, that are not encouraging you to succeed, that are not encouraging you to achieve to your capabilities, that diversity is an asset. So, Meraki, you want to start and tell us where we are now?
So thank you for leading that discussion, Ms. Wolffe. Right now we have time for 2 or 3 questions from the panelists for Ms. Wolffe, if anybody wants to go first.
So I believe you mentioned that you worked with the Department of Education for several years.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. So as part of the bureaucracy, or being part of the bureaucracy, what do you think is the most effective way to influence educational policy as a young person, whether we want to influence it on the national level or at the local level for issues that we want to address?
Well, let me just tell you what I did at the U.S. Department of Education, and I think that will help you. I actually worked for the Office for Civil Rights in Boston and in Philadelphia. I was the chief attorney in Boston and the deputy director and acting director in Philadelphia. And I do believe, at the time, you did not have to be affected by what was going on to file a complaint. So if you observed something, you could file a complaint about it. It wasn't the same as court. Now, I don't know what the current status of that is in the department, but I have found that through the complaint process, you can achieve change at the school level, and it has to start at the school level. Now, I once did a 5-district complaint here in Maryland, because we also did compliance reviews. So if we keep seeing the same issue coming up from various places, we will initiate a compliance review ourselves on that issue. And we actually initiated one in 96, 97 here in Montgomery County on the issue of discipline, which to this day is still one of my big issues. Well, let me back up and say it wasn't on discipline, it was on the overrepresentation of minorities in special education, because that's the problem that we kept seeing raised from the county. And so we decided to do a compliance review on it, and we did get change. The change doesn't seem to have lasted and taken, so this is still an issue in my mind, but we are working on that. MCPS is working on discipline right now. Does that help you any?
Yeah, thank you.
Ms. Wolffe,
Sure.
I know a lot of the work that you do on the Board of Education is more so on policy. So how can you begin to actually change the culture of things, between teachers and counselors and students and things like that?
That's an issue of training. Okay, so we are doing extensive cultural competency training every year. Now, I'm going to say something just a little bit controversial, but it's my belief, and I'm entitled to my belief. I'm not sure how we're measuring that change yet, because it's very hard to change people's attitudes. And quite frankly, some of them may decide that they don't want to change, and they may need to think about exiting the system. But training is the first vehicle. Give people an opportunity to think about their biases, because everybody has them, but you have to recognize that you have them, before you stop inflicting them on these children.
Thank you, Avery and Luca, for those questions. So now we're going to move into the Q&A with the audience. So the first question we have here is for the panelists, and it says, how are you planning to expand your programs in coming years? How can YCC help you achieve your long-term goals?
I'll kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone here. Kaden asked below, she asked about how are you going to expand your program and collaborate with other schools. And Valentia has been thinking about working with other schools in the area, and we've actually thought about reaching out to students at other high schools who would be able to work in their local middle schools, And so they could start their own branches. I mean, it wouldn't be like there's like a central leadership, since Eduardo and I will be going off to college soon. But it's kind of just like spreading the idea and the philosophy of the organization. And I think that's the most important part. It doesn't need to be like an exact replicate of what we're doing, but they can kind of be carrying forward the same goal and objectives and doing the same thing in their schools.
To add on to that, for steps, we kind of envisioned ourselves as like a coalition as well, in order to really like spread the word and like make us stronger as a movement. So in order to like expand our programs, we just would want to include like more student groups in order to build the coalition and build our base.
If nobody else wants to answer that one, we can move on to the next question, which is, how are your projects dealing with the issue of COVID?
I can take this one because I think I addressed it a little bit in my slide. What we're trying to do right now is just address the issues that were already exacerbated by COVID-19. So lower income students who already tend to be behind in schools, these are the ones who often don't have access to computers and Wi-Fi. So we, as a group, we're just trying to make sure that distance learning is equitable, because I have heard from some students that not everybody has access to computers even still, and things like that. So.
Okay, I would like to talk about something similar Avery was talking about the COVID-19 pandemic. It's more of like a positive thing about the pandemic, where there aren't many positive things, but due to like the pandemic, it allows students to have a bit more like leeway and free time. And it's like a perfect opportunity for students to like catch up and like be able to like learn like coding, because like there are like colleges and universities like Harvard, they're offering free online like computer science classes where students are able to learn coding languages. And it's like a really good opportunity for students that might not be able to like pay like thousands of like dollars for like college courses, and now they're able to do it online. So I think that's like a positive part of it.
And can I just jump in there a second and make a point that if you know of any students that need a computer, they need to get in touch with the principal at their school, because we have Chromebooks available, and we've already provided 65,000 students with Chromebooks and 4,000, in excess of 4,000 Wi-Fi connections. So if you know of anyone that needs something, have them contact the board or contact their school, and we will definitely work on it, because you know, this is a problem. We don't want anybody to be without access, because you're right, it is highlighted a lot.
Thank you for that. So next we have, how can individual students become more culturally competent and serve as allies to students being affected by the opportunity gap?
I can take this question. In order to become more culturally competent and serve as allies, the biggest thing is just like getting to know the people. It really, it like humanizes the people, and it just makes it like they're not just a statistic. You see them as a person, you know them intimately, you know their issues more intimately. So just like this is especially easy in Montgomery County because we're so lucky to be in such a diverse place. It's so easy to have like a diverse group of friends, and that alone can really increase your cultural competency. Oh, great question, by the way.
Sorry, if I could just add, I was just going to say, I think also dialogues really do go far. When you're able to sit down and just really talk to a person and be able to understand their story, that makes you more culturally competent. You're able to not only just understand the issue broadly, because the opportunity gap is a pretty broad topic issue, but able to understand the different ways it really affects a person. And I feel like as if dialogues, not only does it touch upon that, but it just goes deeper. You're able to really, like as Avery said, you're able to really get to know the person. And honestly, that's how we've been going about trying to educate people on the opportunity gap. It's through having these conversations. And I think we're in MCPS, we're very fortunate with having so many clubs that really expose topics like this, especially the opportunity gap. And like so many clubs, like in some type of way, they touch on the topic. And I think going to those clubs and being able to have a conversation with somebody, or just even an ESOL student, like just being able to talk to somebody who's different than you, who's from a different life, who walks a different path, I think really will benefit anybody.
Our next question is, what was the biggest obstacle when creating your organizations? This could be logistically or not.
Honestly, our program wasn't that difficult to start. The principal at Sligo was really nice and accommodating, and we just spoke to her and she hooked us up with a teacher that I knew during my time at Sligo. And we kind of just agreed for her to be our supervisor, and she allowed us to use the space to work with these students. And so I'd say the biggest problem was definitely accessing the students. A lot of them weren't able to stay after school last year. And so this year we decided to work directly with the ESOL coordinator and kind of do like a partnership. So there were already a bunch of students staying there after school. And we decided that we would kind of shift around our objectives and our goals. And then we were able to work directly with a myriad of students. So that was really good. And it was an obstacle, but we definitely overcame it.
For my organization, I guess it was kind of difficult like getting started in the beginning because I know lots of students, well, I don't know if I explained this that well, but initially we rallied around the issue of like the boundary analysis because that was like inspiring to a lot of students. And there were so many people like throughout MCPS who did support it and so many students, but there wasn't really a centralized like leadership. And actually what was really helpful to me, I had an adult mentor from the Youth Activism Project, and they're amazing. Like they help students all across the country who are passionate about an issue create like an actual group. And I credit so much to them. That's how we've been able to be so successful and so organized. And we just started 3 months ago, but I think we've gotten a lot done and really grown our coalition thanks to them.
So with MSP, I obviously wasn't around when the program first developed. However, through hearing the stories, our biggest obstacle was, I think, a lot of people owning up that the opportunity gap even exists. So once again, it was a topic we touched on earlier, is just the fear of recognizing that some people might be in fault for this taking place. And I think that fear is still here from amongst a lot of people. Whenever we do try and do some things, we still get that feeling back. However, I think it definitely has improved, but it's still present.
Thank you all in the audience for joining. We really appreciate your support of the student activists on this panel. They're incredible students who are doing really, really important work to address an issue that affects so many students and adults across the county. And I think on behalf of all students, we thank you, those of you on the panel right now. Ms. Wolffe, we really appreciate you joining us today. You exemplify what it means to be an equity warrior. And it's been a pleasure having you connect with our panelists. So thank you very much. And Meraki, thank you for facilitating and moderating this discussion and moving things along in a timely manner. Before we close off, I'd like to extend a big thank you to Tracy Wilton and Mark, who have been behind the scenes helping us make the technical logistics flow and ensuring that everything goes smoothly. None of this could be done without you. For all of you in the audience, if you're interested in connecting more with our panelists, whether it's from the Opportunity Gap panel, the Social Empowerment panel, or our Sparking Discussions panel, we'll follow up with recordings and contact information so that you can connect with these wonderful activists. But we appreciate all of your support, you guys tuning in during these very uncertain times. And we hope you have a great rest of your Sunday. So thank you very much and goodbye.